The sun bled across the vast plains, painting the sky in a final, indifferent flourish of orange and bruised purple. It was the hour when the savannah exhaled, a deep, ancient breath that carried the scent of dry grass and the promise of predatory night. A boundless expanse, beautiful yet utterly merciless, it stretched to horizons that seemed to curve away into nothingness, emphasizing the crushing loneliness that could engulf a solitary being. Amidst this sprawling emptiness, a different kind of wound was opening on the earth. The sound came first, a high-pitched, desperate wail that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the world, echoing across the fading light, the cry of a baby elephant. Kalo, barely a year old, stumbled through the tall grasses, a tiny, grey spectre of grief, his small trunk flailing, his ears flapping uselessly as he called for a mother who would never answer. Dr. Aries Thorne watched from the distant crest of a low kopje, his binoculars steady, his entire being a study in grim resignation. His face, weathered by a decade of dust and sun, held a necessary professional detachment, yet a somber shadow played across his features. He'd seen it countless times. The savannah was a brutal cradle, offering no quarter for the vulnerable, and an orphaned calf, especially one so young, was simply an open invitation. Nature's laws were immutable, written in tooth and claw, a truth he understood with a bone-deep certainty. This calf's fate, in his experienced estimation, was already sealed, an inevitable tragedy playing out before his eyes. He might as well be marked for the vultures already circling, patiently, miles overhead. Then, a shift. A flicker on a distant ridge, too low for a bird, too fluid for a shadow. It moved. A predator. There was no mistaking the low-slung, powerful form that emerged, silhouetted sharply against the last defiant streak of light. The tension in the air thickened, palpable and cold. A lioness. Her outline was clear, majestic and terrifying, a stark emblem of the harsh reality Aries had just contemplated. The outcome seemed certain, a grim footnote to the dying day. The lioness began a slow, deliberate walk down the ridge, directly towards the crying calf. The outcome seemed certain. Dr. Aries Thorne pressed the binoculars hard against his face, every muscle tensed, bracing for the inevitable. Beside him, his junior researcher, Anya, let out a shaky breath. "Any movement, Doctor," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rising wind. Aries said nothing, his jaw tight. They had witnessed this tableau countless times, the vulnerable prey, the patient predator. This was how the savannah worked. This was nature's immutable law. But Zola, the lioness, did not stalk. She did not crouch. Her magnificent body moved with an unhurried, almost weary grace. She passed by a small herd of impala, grazing nervously, yet she did not even glance their way. No predatory focus. No hunt in her eyes. It was bewildering. Aries lowered the binoculars for a second, rubbing his eyes, then raised them again. Still the same. Impossible. She continued her slow descent, a golden shadow against the bruised sky, until she stood mere feet from the shaking calf. Kalo, the tiny elephant, froze. His cries caught in his throat, a silent, guttural gasp of terror. Every instinct screamed for him to run, but exhaustion and fear had rooted him to the spot. The lioness, Zola, moved again. She did not pounce. She did not strike. Instead, with a liquid grace that defied logic, she sank to the ground a few feet from Kalo, settling herself. A low sound rumbled in her chest, a soft, non-threatening chuffing, utterly devoid of menace. Aries watched, his mind reeling. This was not predation. This was something else. Kalo, overwhelmed by instinct and the sheer, desperate need for warmth, for presence, for anything that wasn't cold loneliness, took a hesitant, trembling step towards her. Then another. He moved like a sleepwalker drawn to a distant light. The vast, brutal framework of Aries' understanding shattered into 1,000 pieces. This was impossible. This was beautiful. Kalo collapsed into sleep near Zola's flank, and she rested her massive head on her paws, watching over him. The night stretched, a velvet shroud over the savannah, but for Aries and his small team, there was no rest. Binoculars pressed to eyes, thermal cameras scanning, they bore witness to the impossible tableau unfolding beneath the vast canopy of stars. Kalo, a tiny, grieving shadow, was curled into the warm flank of a lioness, his soft, unsteady breaths barely audible over the distant thrum of the generator from their camp. Every rustle of dry grass, every faraway call of a night bird, was amplified, a potential threat to this fragile truce. Hours bled into one another, each minute a testament to Zola's unwavering presence. Then, a new threat emerged from the inky blackness, the cackling, opportunistic calls of a hyena clan. Ares's gut tightened. This was it. The moment nature would reassert its brutal order. But Zola, the solitary lioness, stirred. Not with predatory stealth, but with a sudden, explosive fury that sent shivers down Ares's spine. She rose, a golden spectre against the night, and without hesitation, charged. Her roars were not those of a hunter, but of a protector, raw and visceral, scattering the scavengers into the darkness. She returned, settling back, her gaze sweeping the perimeter before resting on the sleeping calf once more. Ares scribbled furiously in his field notes, his mind racing. Zola? He knew her. An outcast, driven from her pride months ago after a brutal skirmish with a rival male. She had lost her own litter of cubs in the chaos, a tragedy that had left her a solitary wanderer. He had documented her grief then, the hollow, vacant look in her eyes. Now, watching her defend this orphan, a profound understanding began to dawn. Grief recognizes grief, no matter the shape it wears. Zola, too, had been a mother. Zola, too, had known loss. As the first blush of dawn painted the eastern sky in hues of rose and gold, the savannah awoke. The chill of the night receded, revealing the two figures still intertwined, the grey mass of the calf, the golden power of the lioness. It was a sacred, impossible tableau, etched into the very fabric of the landscape. Ares lowered his binoculars, a slow breath escaping him. His professional detachment, the armor he had worn for decades, felt suddenly shattered, felt suddenly raw. He scribbled a note, extended interspecies interaction. Subject, observation. He was bending the rules, but the rules had never accounted for this. The impossible tableau lasted through the morning, but the serene image began to fray with the rising sun. Kalo's cries, which had subsided into soft whimpers in Zola's comforting proximity, now sharpened into a desperate bleating. He pushed against her flank, seeking something she could not provide. He was starving. Zola, too, was becoming visibly agitated. Her ear swiveled, twitching at the distant scent of grazers, her eyes fixed on Kalo's weakening form. Her predatory instincts, dormant in her grief, were slowly reawakening, warring with the strange, fierce protectiveness she now felt. She was trapped, tethered by an unseen bond, her survival conflicting with Kalo's deepening distress. Back at the observation post, the debate was hushed, intense. "We can't intervene, Ares. You know the protocol." "It's a cardinal sin," whispered Lena, his most cautious researcher. Ares ran a hand over his tired face. "And watching him starve, Lena? What kind of scientific integrity is that? What kind of human? Human? What kind?" The image of Kalo's trunk, now thick and strong, resting in soft repose upon Zola's sleeping flank, lingered like a prayer in the vast quiet of the savannah. But that peace was fleeting, a fragile whisper against the encroaching roar of the outside world. It began with a distant drone, a mechanical bee buzzing across the endless blue. A small supply plane, off its usual flight path, dipped low, its pilot's curiosity piqued by the improbable silhouette on the plains. A camera lens, sharper than the human eye, captured the impossible tableau, a lioness, an elephant calf, inseparable. The images were relayed, data points shared, coordinates logged. The secret was out. Word traveled with the speed of wildfire, leaping from digital screens to hushed phone calls across the international conservation community. Not a celebration, but a wave of alarm. Dr. Ares Thorne's satellite phone, a lifeline in the wilderness, became a conduit of dread. The calls were official, terse. His superiors at the park authority were beyond concerned. A video conference was set, Dr. Evelyn Reed's face appearing on the screen, her expression unyielding. "Ares," she began, her voice calm but clipped, "this simply cannot continue. It is unprecedented. It is a fundamental breach of every protocol we have." The bureaucratic logic was clear, presented with the chilling precision of a medical diagnosis. It was unnatural. It was dangerous for the field team. It was unsustainable. Kalo was growing, his size a constant, undeniable reminder of his species. Zola, for all her tender restraint, was still a predator. Her instincts, they argued, would inevitably return. The safety of the operation, the integrity of their mission, the potential for a public relations disaster, all were weighed, all pointed to one conclusion. The directive was issued without room for debate. Ares and his team were to tranquilize both animals. They would be relocated, separated, to facilities deemed appropriate, for their own good. The words hung in the air, cold and final, a death knell to the fragile family he had sworn to protect. Ares stood alone at dusk, the cold glow of the satellite phone in his hand, looking out at the family he has sworn to protect. He is trapped. The cold glow of the satellite phone in his hand felt like a lead weight, yet Ares could not bring himself to make the call that would set the inevitable in motion. He looked out at the two impossible creatures, Kalo now nestled against Zola's side, the lioness a warm, watchful shadow in the fading light. Unstable conditions, he transmitted the next morning, his voice calm, citing unexpected thermal activity and a sudden spike in local wildlife movement, a slight exaggeration, a calculated delay. He bought himself hours, then a full day, then another. Each moment was a reprieve, an opportunity. His lenses became an extension of his will. He filmed Kalo's clumsy attempts at play, Zola's patient, almost amused nudges. He documented the way the calf would nuzzle into her flank, the low, rumbling purr that vibrated from her chest, a sound no one had believed a lioness could make, certainly not for an elephant. This wasn't science in the traditional sense, this was a plea, a visual testament to a bond that defied categories. The next call was unavoidable. "Thorne, what's going on out there? Your reports are unconventional. This intervention needs to happen now." The voice of Dr. Hammond, his superior, crackled with bureaucratic impatience. Ares held the phone tight, his eyes on the savannah where Zola was teaching Kalo to avoid a patch of thorny acacia. "Dr. Hammond," Ares began, his voice low, steady, "what we are witnessing here is beyond our protocols. We can't just categorize this as an anomaly to be corrected. Kalo needs Zola, and in a way I cannot fully explain, Zola needs Kalo." Just then, a massive, scarred bull elephant, solitary and territorial, lumbered into view on the periphery, heading directly towards their quiet sanctuary. Kalo, still too small to fully understand the danger, swayed, a nervous energy rippling through his young body. Ares continued, his voice hardening with conviction, "The laws of nature are written in tooth and claw, Dr. Hammond, we all know that. But sometimes the exceptions, the ones that defy everything, those are written in the heart." The bull, now closer, trumpeted, a low, guttural warning. Zola didn't hesitate. She didn't flee, didn't cower. With a primeval roar, a sound that shook the very air, she launched herself forward, a blur of muscle and manet, planting herself between Kalo and the advancing giant. It was an act of impossible courage, a defiance of every instinct, every rule of her species. The bull, momentarily taken aback by the sheer audacity of the smaller predator, veered off, trumpeting its annoyance. Ares clicked off the radio, cutting off the argument. He turns to his junior researcher. "Log it," he says. "Maternal protective behavior." He has made his choice. Ares's choice hung in the savannah air, a silent defiance against the unyielding directives of bureaucracy. But even as he made his stand, time, the ultimate arbiter, continued its relentless march. Weeks blurred into months, and the golden light of the dry season gave way to the vibrant greens of the rains, then back again. A time-lapse montage, if one were to capture it, would show Kalo growing with astonishing speed, his gangly legs thickening, his soft, downy coat replaced by the rough, scarred hide of a maturing elephant. He was no longer a tiny shadow at Zola's side, he now towered over her, his broad back nearly level with her powerful shoulders. The visual contrast, once stark, had inverted. Their unique bond, once a delicate ballet of caution and nascent affection, now navigated the precarious realities of his burgeoning size. Their playful interactions, which Ares had so meticulously documented, grew boisterous, a delicate balance of restraint from Zola and burgeoning strength from Kalo. One afternoon, caught up in a game of chase, Kalo, in an exuberant display, swung his trunk too wide, catching Zola in the flank. She rolled, a surprised grunt escaping her, momentarily stunned. There was no malice in his action, only a fact of physics, a stark reminder that his growing power was an undeniable force. The danger was real, a quiet hum beneath their improbable peace. Zola's own behavior began to subtly shift. She was still fiercely protective, still the vigilant guardian, but a new watchfulness entered her eyes. Her gaze would often drift past Kalo, past their immediate territory, to the distant horizon. At times, she would grow more distant, retreating to a solitary copy, her silhouette etched against the fiery sunsets, lost in thought Ares could only guess at. He watched, his heart heavy, understanding that even the most profound love could not rewrite the fundamental truths of the wild. One morning, Ares observed a key moment that would forever sear itself into his memory. A distant elephant herd, a shimmering grey mirage, appeared on the horizon. They were far, too far for Kalo to sense, but Zola's keen eyes had found them. She watched them for a long time, her body still, her tail a slow, rhythmic flick against the dust. Then, slowly, deliberately, her gaze shifted. She looked at Kalo, who was innocently attempting to pull a stubborn tuft of grass, his ears flapping contentedly. The expression on her face, in her eyes, was one Ares could only describe as a mixture of profound love and sorrow, a deep, ancient understanding. The narrator notes that Zola, better than anyone, understood the final truth: he was an elephant, and she was a lion. And love could not change that. The savannah shimmered under a high sun, but the air vibrated with a different kind of heat, a deep, resonant rumble that carried across the vast plains. It was the sound of family, of home, of a migrating elephant herd moving closer than they had in months. Kalo, now a formidable young elephant, paused mid-stride, his ears fanning wide, catching every low frequency. His head tilted, a primal call stirring something ancient within him. His large body, once so dependent, now quivered with an instinctive pull towards his own kind. He glanced at Zola, then back at the distant, moving grey mass, his body a battlefield of competing loyalties, the profound, quiet safety of the lioness who had saved him, and the undeniable, genetic imperative of his true herd. Zola saw his conflict. She watched him, her golden eyes unblinking, reflecting the immense, impossible choice laid bare before them. She did not try to hold him back, did not attempt to distract him with a playful nip or a gentle rumble. She simply watched, a silent sentinel of a love that demanded ultimate sacrifice. Then, in a moment of staggering emotional intelligence, she rose. Slowly, deliberately, she began to walk, not away from Kalo, but with him, towards the horizon where the elephant herd grew ever more defined. Every step was a silent conversation, a farewell whispered on the wind. They reached the invisible boundary of her territory, a place Kalo had rarely ventured beyond. Zola stopped. She nudged him forward with her massive head, a gentle, insistent pressure on his flank. He hesitated, then she extended her tongue, giving him a final, lingering lick on the trunk, a gesture of profound tenderness that spoke volumes of their impossible bond. Ares and his team, observing from a respectful distance, watched in stunned, tearful silence. There was no sound from them, only the quiet understanding that choked in their throats. It was not an abandonment, they knew. It was a gift, perhaps the most profound act of love any of them had ever witnessed. Kalo took his first steps toward the herd, looks back one last time at the lone lioness, and then turns to join his own kind, disappearing into the sea of grey bodies. Weeks melted into months, the savannah cycling through its dry and wet seasons, marking the quiet passage of time since the impossible farewell. Dr. Ares Thorne and his team, their hearts still heavy but resolute, continued their diligent observations. Eventually, they located Kalo. The young elephant, no longer a vulnerable calf but a robust juvenile, moved with confidence among his new family, his rumbles blending seamlessly with theirs. He was thriving, a grey shadow absorbed into the vast, ancient rhythm of the herd, completely accepted, his past and unspoken legacy carried in his sturdy form. Zola, too, was found, patrolling the familiar boundaries of her territory. She was, as always, solitary, a queen of her domain, but no longer haunted by the ghost of past loss, nor bound by the impossible task of nurturing an elephant. Her gaze, Ares noted, held a quiet wisdom, a settled peace that had not been there before. She never sought a mate again, never rejoined a pride. Her family had been uniquely forged and uniquely fulfilled. Her commitment had been absolute, her purpose served, and she carried the quiet dignity of one who had loved beyond all expectation. Ares sat at his worn field desk, the glow of his laptop illuminating the lines of his final, official report. It was a document of observation, of data points, of recorded behaviors, a precise, scientific recounting of an interspecies interaction. But beneath the clinical prose, his heart hummed with a different truth, a conviction forged in the crucible of impossible love. What he had witnessed was not an anomaly to be dissected, but a testament to the capacity of love to transcend biology, to rewrite the very laws of the wild. The sun bled crimson across the horizon, painting the savanna in hues of farewell and promise. On her familiar ridge, a lone silhouette stood etched against the fiery sky. Zola? The wind whispered through her mane, carrying the scent of dust and freedom. She was alone, yes, but not lonely. Her purpose, though fleeting, had left an indelible mark, a resonance that pulsed through the vast, quiet land. Ares's final voiceover: some families are not meant for a lifetime. They are meant to last exactly as long as they are needed. But their echo remains forever.